I'm Alison Von Glinow, and I have a practice in Chicago with my partner and husband, Kwong, called Kwong Von Glinow. And I never knew I wanted to be an architect. I sort of stumbled upon it in college. I knew I liked math. I was actually really interested in statistics. I also really enjoyed art and writing. And I was studying abroad in Venice, and I met a girl who was studying architecture and telling her, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to major in. And she said, try out architecture. And then I took a studio with Madeline Schwartzman at Barnard. And I remember her talking about thresholds instead of just like a doorway. And I was totally excited by that word as a way of thinking about space and thinking differently about even just how I was living in space. And so kind of since that moment, I got wrapped into architecture. Barnard was actually really tough. That was my dad trying to push a women's college on me. And I went there for a summer class in law, actually, and just loved being in New York City and didn't care it was a women's college, and actually just grew to love being around a bunch of other women who were doing amazing things. And yeah, so that I loved being at Barnard. And then at Barnard, I quickly went into the architecture program and then looked at a lot of different architecture schools, but knew pretty much from the start I wanted to be at the GSD, and was very happy to go there directly after school. I didn't work in between. And I think that was both a good thing and maybe not a great thing to not have had work experience in between there, just because it kind of, you don't have that time in between to think through totally what your interests are. So it's sort of like warp speed once you're in there. But yeah, I loved my time at the GSD and the different professors I got to meet there. I was born in Ohio, but only lived there for 4 years. Then my parents moved to Chicago, or a suburb outside of Chicago. And I grew up here outside of Chicago. And then after that, went to Barnard in New York, and then to Boston for grad school. I would say Chicago's very much my home, but professionally, it definitely wasn't. And it wasn't an obvious choice to start our practice, even though I grew up here. I had no professional connections in Chicago, and Lapchi, being from Hong Kong, didn't have any professional connections in Chicago. But it was a place that we had visited both together, and we really liked the city of Chicago and saw what was happening here, the other young practices, the schools that were really supportive of young practices, and saw that this was a place that could make sense for us to try this out.
Yeah. And what about Basel? Like, how do you feel your connection to Basel is?
Yeah. Basel, in some ways, is like a very romantic experience for me. It's the first place Lapchi and I lived together. But it's also a place that we got to go see the most amazing architecture together. It was really a place of travel for me. It was about being in an office that was doing amazing work, working on amazing projects, and being in an environment 24/7, basically. Not that I was working, but our friends who are in the office, you're hanging out with them afterwards. And it's just a very immersive experience. Thinking about architecture, making architecture, seeing architecture. It was just these amazing 2 years there. Definitely, I think it's very purposeful, the office environment that's curated by Herzog and de Meuron. The studio is a campus of 4 or 5 different buildings, a courtyard in between. At 10 a.m. there's coffee break. At 2 p.m. there's tea time break. And everyone during that time goes out and meets in the courtyard. Some people are smoking, some people are drinking coffee. And you're talking about what you're working on that day, asking other people what they're working on. So it's, this really amazing environment that you're just really totally immersed in architecture. At Barnard, Karen Fairbanks, she is a professor there and also chair of the architecture department there. She, throughout my whole education at Barnard and into the GSD, and even now, whenever I'm in New York, I go see her. She's really been a strong mentor of mine, and has kind of always talked me through the process, but also kind of said, asked me very personally, is that what you want to be doing? Or not just say, this is the next step for what you should do, but really personally making sure that's the right next step for me. And I really appreciate that, very personal mentorship from her. Very similar, Mariana Ibanez from the GSD. She was my professor there, but also my thesis advisor. And I really admire her and look up to her and her practice and her work, and how she's built such an amazing career. And I also always love to go see her and share with her what I'm up to and kind of hear any thoughts she has. I really respect her, and I love how she's always kind of during my thesis, she thought about every aspect of my project. And I hope when we do projects, we can always kind of think as broadly and also so pointedly, like she does. And it's a really big challenge to do something like that. But I hope we can achieve something like that. Another mentor of mine, Scott Duncan, he was my boss at SOM, and now he's a partner at the Chicago office. But he was my boss at SOM in New York. But he was really, and still is, a mentor of mine. I really look up to him for his successes at SOM, and also how he's built his team at SOM. It was a great team that I was a part of there, and I loved getting to work with the team that he built there and how we approached projects there. And kind of that's something I'm always hoping that I've learned enough from in my short time there, that I could bring to this practice. And I still really look up to him and hope to have him more involved in kind of how we're growing as an office.
Yeah. Can you maybe mention what was this approach here?
Yeah, I would say it was the team approach there. We all almost had crazy large projects we were working on independently or as a group of 2 or 3. But we all were very involved with each other's projects. And there was no hierarchy at a place like SOM. I think that's really strange to hear. And there wasn't a corporate attitude or anything like that. It was really driving for making space and making huge spaces also that we knew were going to be places that needed to last a long time and serve so many people and different cultures, that it was just a really exciting project to be a part of. And a team that was working collectively together towards that project, that I think was really important with how he built that team together. When we started our practice, we both had clear strengths, I would say, and clear weaknesses. And I would say building a practice together, the two of us, it's always been how to build on our weaknesses and also strengthen our strengths. And so that's sort of how we've divvied up the work. Lapchi's amazing at concept. That's his total strength. And I would say he leads a lot of the concept. My brain works in detail, and I would say I lead a lot of the development of projects, but everything is together all the time. And yeah, our day-to-day, I mean, it's talking most of the day. There's very little time where there's silence between us. But even like emails, like everything is, we're still learning together as a practice. So nothing's ever like, well, that's how we always do that. Because almost everything's new to us. So there's really, we're always trying to say like, is this how we want to approach that? Or is this how we want to respond to that? So we're kind of always in dialogue. That's sort of our day to day. And it doesn't actually necessarily matter who's doing what in a way, but kind of the conversation of how we put the practice together. Yeah, so I was at SOM for 2 years. Lapchi was there for 5 years. So I think Lapchi kind of brings more of the Herzog and de Meuron aspect to our practice. I had worked at SOM for a year only, actually, after graduating. But SOM in my heart is like a place I love. I kind of see myself as bringing that aspect to our practice as sort of like a hybrid of like these two different types of ways of approaching building buildings, and even approaching how you work together in an office. And I actually think that collision is really good for our firm. We take different things from both practices and try to merge them together into how we want to direct our own practice from SOM. We used to have a morning meeting that was like so effective at understanding all of the projects that were happening around our area within the office. And that's something we do here. Each of us present what we did the day before. Our interns present what they did the day before. And then we all talk together and kind of have like basically zero hierarchy in how we're approaching or giving comments and feedback into each project. And from Herzog and de Meuron, I would say like just this kind of always, not like never satisfied, but in a way almost never satisfied. Like always reiterating, always questioning, what if we did this? Could we do it this way instead? And I think that's how we kind of push and develop through all of our projects. So this house was not meant for us when we built it. It was truly a speculative project. It was a development project of our practice, and that's something that we wanted to build into our practice, that we're like 50% commission-based, 50% development-based, or like initiating our projects as a development. So Ardmore House was meant to be both generic and specific at the same time. We wanted to use Ardmore House to showcase the values that we wanted to present really in all of our projects. We had done a lot of housing competitions early on in our practice, and the values we were looking to bring to the forefront of all the projects were being able to connect in a community, in living spaces, bringing openness, light, and air to create healthy living environments, to really think about things like mental health. What will be a space that really helps keep healthy, happy lifestyles in a really basic way. And Ardmore House was our small way of trying to show what's possible with being open in a very urban area and not being afraid of being open and engaged with your surrounding community, and like being kind of like trustful in a way with that kind of architecture. So it wasn't meant for us, but of course, like designing something, we probably wouldn't design something we also wouldn't want to live in. So when we moved into here, it was actually a very like natural fit in a way, and really nice. We have 2 kids, and seeing them start to grow up here on this level. Our daughter's kind of always waving at neighbors and looking or saying shoo, 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 because that's Cantonese for squirrel on the telephone wire. It's pretty amazing to see how this home really engages with the neighborhood, and that we also can fit into this house. We work on the basement level here, and we have our modeling area. We have our office space. This is where we bring our clients also. And we found that having this house, living here, but also being able to show our clients, potential clients, and also current clients, it's really a way to showcase like thinking differently and not having assumptions on how we should live or what's the typical way to build has been really helpful. Even to just point out very simple details around the house for projects that are going into construction about how we want to like have details come together. It's been extremely helpful. We were really looking for something we could afford was one thing, but also really a missed opportunity. And so this lot is on an alleyway. Our real estate agent didn't want to show us this lot in the first place. He was like, no, like as a development project, no one's going to buy a house on an alleyway. It's noisy, there's no privacy. And we really liked hearing that in a way. We kind of saw that as a challenge. We put an offer in for this house and actually didn't get it the first time. It stayed on the market for like another 6 months or something, not selling. And then we put another offer in and were able to get it. But that whole time we were kind of exploring what were we thinking, how would we want to approach a new way of living in Chicago? That's not like a typical 3-flat or a typical single family home. And when we got this lot, it was very obvious how, I shouldn't say obvious, but like we really saw so many advantages to being on an alleyway. Like we had the longest side of the lot that could receive so much light. How would we take advantage of that? And so like it became very site specific and responsive to this site once we had the specific site. I taught for 1 semester at the School of the Art Institute, an elective class, when we first started our practice here in Chicago, and just kind of quickly saw like teaching was taking over versus our practice. And it was really important that like, since we were starting this, that I wanted to give it my all and really just put all of my effort and energy into the practice. So I decided to be the 100% in KVG, and Lapchi loves teaching and is a great teacher and was able to dedicate some of his time to teaching. I would say, but even though I'm not directly teaching with the school, I do believe it's like hugely important to be involved with organizations that are teaching in the discipline. So like I love being on reviews. I do that a lot, but I also, with different organizations, try to be involved in some way. So more recently, this past fall, I did the Reimagine program with the Architectural League of New York for new graduates. And I also have worked with the New York Urban Design Forum as a Forefront Fellow to work on co-living housing models in New York City. And that was more of kind of like a think tank with a younger group of colleagues kind of working on different aspects of living within the city. And so like I like to be involved in different organizations, or the Architectural Club of New York. I'm a board member of that. And so right now we're actually working on a competition to save the Phyllis Wheatley home in Chicago. So there are different ways I like to be involved, but not as like directly a full-time teaching. For the Reimagine series and for the Architectural League of New York, there were maybe like 20 coordinators or something. And so Lapchi and I were a coordinator for a group of 6 students from 6 different schools. And they made a manifesto for what they wanted the practice of architecture to look like in the future. And so we helped kind of guide them in forming their manifesto, which was just this like really amazing, not only our group, but the collection of all of the manifestos that were made were just like amazing. And you should check them out on our Architecture League. I feel like I do always know what the next step is, or I have a next step in mind for what I want. And Lapchi has this kind of like Chinese thinking, which is very like long thinking, and I have this kind of more American like immediacy sensibility. So that kind of internal fighting we'll have in our office is good and productive, and lets us see both sides of this. But I would say patience is something I'm always still struggling with. Haven't quite learned that yet. But I think architecture is such a long game that it's really a must-have in this industry.